The Supreme Court of India on Tuesday warned petitioning parties from Manipur. The court's message was loud and clear. It was, do not politicize the armed forces. Do not politicize their deployment. Do not question which force is to be deployed which place. Many voices from the state have been talking about redeployment of forces based on personal experience, but the top court said that they cannot issue directives on where a particular battalion of soldiers can be deployed. The Supreme Court said it will not issue any directives to the armed forces as it falls within the remit of the elected government. Let army do its job. So ask in my show, to the point, can we absorb Supreme Court's order with an open mind and heart? Can we allow the forces of stability to prevail? Can we let go of the violence and work towards a constructive future? Mr. Suhas Chakma, your opening comments on Supreme Court, because it's setting certain things very, very clear. Those debates which have been part of those last 68 days, 69 days if I'm correct, that certain redeployment needs to take place because certain communities do not trust certain types of forces. Court said no, it is entirely incumbent on the elected government.
Well, I think the Supreme Court is absolutely correct. At the end of the day, the court cannot assess the ground situation, and deployment of the security forces requires some ground experience. And based on the affidavits filed by both parties, I don't think the court can arrive at a situation where it could take over the functions of the executive in terms of deployment of the security forces. So if you look at the observations of the Supreme Court, it's very clear. It is not to say that the Supreme Court in any way is exonerating the government of the day. It has nothing to do with the functioning of the government. I think what the court is trying to do is basically draw the lines between the responsibilities of the executive as well as the responsibilities of the judiciary.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Toming, your opening comments on this?
In the May 6 or May 7 hearing, has already made this pertinent observation that it is a humanitarian crisis. So when the Supreme Court said that it's a humanitarian crisis, there's this aspects of the violation of human rights that has happened to the certain section of the society within Manipur and outside Manipur also, because of the violence escalating beyond the borders of Manipur, and maybe to an extent because of the internally displaced people, there is actually a humanitarian crisis as well. And when the Supreme Court made this pertinent observation yesterday that it should not interfere, but then the question that needs to be asked is neither the center is interfering, and it seems for the past 69 days or more, the state has been appallingly incapable of containing the violence, and then sporadic incidents of violence keeps on happening. And therefore, if the Supreme Court says it cannot intervene, but maybe look into the humanitarian crisis and issues, and also maybe increase the number of relief camps if required, but then the political will from the center is also need of the hour in that context. So where does people of Manipur stand in this democratic setup of an idea of democracy, which is a union of India? Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Ramanand Singh?
Yeah. Karthike, what I wanted to say is, according to the Supreme Court judgment today, is very, very, right to point out that if petitioner demand for one-side protections of their right by the army, there is a question. Supreme Court deny the directions to give to the army and the paramilitary force to provide only for the tribals areas and tribal community. That is why the Supreme Court refused, because of one side demand, one side proposal. If the both side proposal was put for the protections of every right, every life of the people, then they may have thought of something else to be provided by the Supreme Court. So the petitioners only concern for a small section or a very limited section of the people. That's why Supreme Court refused to intervene in handling of law and order situation. And beside it, there are the efforts of the government doing in the ground reality, and the army generally works on the ground reality. Their assessment has been done by the army intelligence, and they work on that. So army function by some rules and regulation, and their input of the intelligence. So therefore, I welcome the Supreme Court direction today for the prevailing conditions of the Manipur.
Okay. And Rami, your opening comments, because you had been part of our discussion for last 68 days. Today's Supreme Court has said something very, very clear. It says do not politicize the force. Don't say that this force needs to go there, that force needs to go there. There are two important developments, Rami, that have taken place. One, I have exposed you authors, journalists, and dignitaries too, which is the observation of the Supreme Court.
Karthikeya, good evening, and thank you for again having me on your debate. My point on what the Supreme Court has said is very limited in terms of I don't think anybody should really be attempting to direct the army what they should be doing or should not be doing. They are an entirely professional force. They have their expertise, and I think this sort of politicization is completely unnecessary considering that people who are making petitions like this or people who are drawing these lines know very well that there are over 42,000 army personnel on the ground, that there have been refuge and shelter homes that have been given, shelter that has been given to over 30,000 people from both communities. 20,000 people have been given passage of way protected by the forces on ground. So there is enough work that is happening. The army knows how to control these situations. They know what role they have to play, and they have been playing that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have seen the kind of tapering of violence that has happened in the last 2 months. Of course, the violence was unprecedented. It caught everybody by surprise, and there may have been delayed reactions, and there might be complaints on both ends. But the fact of the matter is, now that we are seeing the violence go down, now that we are seeing the tapering of the kind of conflict that we saw, I don't think this sort of intervention is necessary, and I definitely don't think that this sort of intervention is needed, at least to one of the most professional bodies in the country, that is our military. And I think they've been doing a good job, and this sort of casting such aspersions really does not go down well.